What's up, Taiwan? I'm Liao with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. We begin today in Europe, where plans for military support to protect a future Ukraine peace deal are moving ahead. That's according to British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who has spoken to more than 20 other world leaders. Louise Watt reports.
To keep the pressure on Putin.
With weakening US support for Ukraine, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer convenes a virtual summit with European and Western allies, talking about how to pressure Russian President Vladimir Putin to agree to a ceasefire.
We agreed we will keep increasing the pressure on Russia, keep the military aid flowing to Ukraine, and keep tightening the restrictions on Russia's economy to weaken Putin's war machine and bring him to the table.
Starmer accuses Putin of dragging his feet over a 30-day ceasefire plan proposed by the US, which Ukraine has already signed up to. Putin says he agrees with the idea, but that it needs work.
Для эффективной реализации призыва президента США необходим соответствующий приказ военно-политического руководства Украины своим воинским подразделениям сложить оружие и сдаться в плен.
The concern for Europe and Ukraine is how to make any future peace deals stick.
Thank you so much, Keir. Peace will be more reliable with the European contingents on the ground and the American side as a backstop.
But the US did not attend the virtual summit, and President Donald Trump has not agreed to provide the kind of security backstop Ukraine and its European partners want. Now Europe is having to step up their support. After the virtual call, Starmer says planning for a peacekeeping force is now in an operational phase. Next up, Britain will host a meeting of allies' militaries on how to guarantee Ukraine's future security. That's a clear show of support for Ukraine. But as the war-weary country loses gains to Russia, it's hoping Europe's intensified support doesn't turn out to be just talk. Klein Wong and Louise Watt for TaiwanPlus.
In Taiwan, President Lai Ching-te is unveiling plans to strengthen the country against threats from China, a move that could have harsh consequences for Taiwan's farmers and tourism industry if Beijing decides to retaliate. Strong words from a president for a neighboring country.
这样的中国已是我国反渗透法所定义的境外敌对势力。
President Lai Ching-te last week unveiled plans to strengthen Taiwan in light of threats from the country's neighbor, China. China claims Taiwan as part of its sovereign territory and has been ramping up efforts to infiltrate the country. But with Lai's new measures, which include plans to restore a military court system in Taiwan and counter Chinese espionage among military ranks, it's not a question of how China will react, but when. Beijing has previously used trade and tourism restrictions to punish Taiwan for actions it doesn't like, a move Taipei says is economic coercion. Now, farmers who export their goods to China are bracing for a new storm.
大陆去制裁台湾的话，我希望台湾政府能够拿出相对应的方式来帮助我们农民度过这个难关。
But local agriculture authorities say scars of the past have taught locals a valuable lesson.
除了在大陆的市场以外呢，也有持续的在开拓，包含的新加坡的市场以及国内的市场的部分呢，我们也有持续的一直在做相关的一个销售。
While farmers may be better prepared to deal with impending sanctions from Beijing, the tourism industry is not so optimistic. Tourism operators have eagerly awaited COVID-era travel bans between Taiwan and China to lift.
台湾的旅行社赴大陆旅行的禁团令要解除，可能会更加的困难，进而在大陆旅客来台开放上面，也应该是困难重重。所以呢，我们对这样的情况呢，感到的十分的忧心。
With tensions high and uncertainty looming, Taiwan's industries are bracing for impact, knowing that when Beijing responds, it won't be just farmers and tourism operators feeling the strain. Eason Chen and Liao for TaiwanPlus. Chinese forces have been carrying out nighttime drills over the past several days, according to Chinese state media. China's CCTV military Weibo channel reported pilots training for air combat and ground attacks during midnight and dawn flights. This comes after Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te warned of increasing military threats and propaganda from China. Some Taiwan legislators and scholars say China's late-night flights are meant to intimidate Taiwan. It's been 3 decades since Taiwan democratized, and it now sees massive social movements and political demonstrations. Most recently, the Bluebird movement emerged to protest several bills that include increasing lawmakers' powers. It was Taiwan's biggest protest since the 2014 Sunflower Movement, when hundreds of thousands of protesters occupied the legislature. To discuss social movements and activism in Taiwan, Rick Lauert sat down with the author of Taipei at Daybreak, Brian Hu.
What does the book express? Could you just tell us a little bit about the story? What could we expect?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is a coming-of-age novel in some form, or maybe that's how I just package it as. But then it focuses on participation in social movements from a very young age. Occupy Wall Street in New York, the post-Fukushima anti-nuclear movement in Japan, and then the Sunflower Movement. And so these series of social movements in the early 2010s, and what it was like to be a young person, as a young Asian American participating in those movements and being caught between different identities and navigating that, but also this kind of feeling of youthful rebellion and trying to find oneself in the midst of these large-scale protest movements that are often very tumultuous and chaotic.
You spent time at the Bluebird protests, and obviously there was a lot of comparison between them and the Sunflower Movement. What were the differences you noticed?
It was a much younger movement in the sense that there are younger people that had not participated in the Sunflower Movement. But then in the backstage, it's all the same people, and the organizers are about the same. But the attempt was to make it the almost inverse of the Sunflower Movement, not an intense occupation of a legislature that is this act of storming and occupying a building for 23 days, and that occupation consumes so much resources and energy and creates so much burnout, but having a protest that people go to after work and they can go back home by 12 a.m. usually. So an attempt to preserve the energy of the movement for a later date, rather than to kind of spend it all within this month-long period of time. And so I think it's actually, in ways, reacting to this history. It's an echo of the Sunflower Movement, but attempting to do a different thing, which is also interesting because many of the people involved are, in fact, the same people.
Given that Taiwan still has these large-scale political movements and these big demonstrations, is there a political reality in Taiwan that just remains unchanged?
I think what's interesting is that a lot has actually remained the same. And so we're seeing a recurrence of ideas that came up 10 years ago and were rejected, such as the Cross-Strait Services Trade Agreement. When that was introduced as an idea in the last election cycle, it was quite strange to me that the KMT was still talking about this after seeing such a massive protest a decade earlier, or that they would push through bills as they are doing currently, because you look at 10 years ago and that provoked the public in such an extreme way. And so the more things change, the more they stay the same, and so I would say.
The book explores, the main character in the book storms Taiwan's executive yuan as part of the protest, which was your own personal experience as well. And in the book it talks about the motivations or the decision-making to join this. If you remember back to that time when you chose to be part of that movement and to do that, what some would call drastic action, do you think the change that you wanted to see then has occurred in Taiwan?
I think so. And I think the thing that people forget is that the verdict on the movement changed very much over time. People forget that the movement was still denigrated in many ways until after Taiwan, but even more recently in the current election cycle do people talk about so openly being former Sunflower activists. People just kind of knew that about them, but they didn't emphasize it as much. The executive branch, too, was originally viewed as unjustified by the public for many years. And it was only much later that that is viewed as an act of police violence. And I think people forget how long it actually took for that to occur, for that change in historical verdict on the movement or the various events in the movement to actually shift. And so I think in that way, actually, it's surprised me to a great extent that it has.
That was author of Taipei at Daybreak, Brian Hu. You can watch the full interview on Zoom In, Zoom Out, available on TaiwanPlus.com. Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs is heading to Taiwan after TSMC's record-breaking $100 billion investment in her state. Hobbs will meet with the Taiwanese chip giant's executives to discuss business and collaboration. The company's investment plans are expected to create 40,000 construction jobs and thousands more manufacturing jobs in her state. While in Taiwan, she'll also meet with Taiwan President Lai Ching-te. This marks her second visit to Taiwan as governor. At a time when Taiwan's rural towns are seeing an exodus of young people, one enterprising farmer has returned to his hometown to tell its story through soybeans. Soybeans are a staple in Taiwan. From tofu to soy milk, the bean is a crucial part of Taiwanese diets. The large-scale consumption of soy is exactly why farmer Chen Guangjing takes growing the legume so seriously.
到这边来，除了可以认识黄豆以外啊，认识这些制品以外，其实我们还有一件事情很重要。其实我们透过自然的栽培，然后让我们的环境，然后还有土地都变好。
For Chen, soybeans aren't just a food, they're a way of life. His operation includes educational and hands-on experiences to teach people how soy gets from farm to table.
豆浆一碰到凝固剂的瞬间，反应就开始了。
In his hometown of Beidou Township in central Taiwan, Chen works with local brands to help promote a healthy lifestyle.
我们在做一些食农教育，做一些推广，让他们知道我们吃的黄豆是台湾人自己种的，而且又是健康无毒的。
With every bean planted, Chen hopes people in Taiwan will take a moment to consider what they're eating and where it comes from, whether they're having a glass of soy milk or chowing down on a tender piece of tofu. James Lin and Leslie Liao for TaiwanPlus. One all-female kung fu group in southwestern China has blown up on Chinese social media, blending traditional martial arts with modern dance. Cadence Quaranto reports.
On misty Mount Emei in southwest China, there's an ancient kung fu school where these women are practicing their moves.
我是从小习武，从12岁开始习武。可能因为家里爸爸比较喜欢练武术，然后就把我送去了武校练习。然后就是从小对武术就有一种热爱，觉得女孩子学这个特别飒。
Kung fu has long been a male-dominated art form, but these women have been challenging that idea. They're members of an all-female martial arts group that has blown up on Chinese social media. They post videos of their performances on Douyin, China's version of TikTok, and they've gained over 1 million followers. The group, called Emei Kung Fu Girls, mixes traditional kung fu with modern dance. Dancer Duan says she hopes the group will inspire more young girls to take up martial arts.
就可能他看到我今天练武术特别帅、特别飒，他可能也会引导很多女孩子来学习武术。就是不管是强身健体啊，还是自我防卫啊，我觉得对女孩子都是一个很好的出路。
The videos are also spreading Emei-style kung fu to more people. Originating from Mount Emei centuries ago, it's one of the main martial arts styles in China, but it hasn't become as well known as others, such as the Shaolin style.
然后我觉得峨眉武术它是中国传统文化，然后它有很多历史的东西啊，我觉得是一个非常好的传承的东西。
这个就是在宣传的这个场面上，就比过去的这个力度就更大，这个了解峨眉武术的人也越来越多，想习练峨眉武术的这个群体越来越多。
This ancient art form swiftly gaining new popularity through modern social media. Klein Wang and Cadence Quaranta for TaiwanPlus.
And thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, check out these racers traveling more than 6,000 kilometers between France, Spain, and Morocco. I'm Leslie Liao. Take care and see you next time.
For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, follow TaiwanPlus on socials. Pika!